Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about beginner's mind. And beginner's mind, known as Shoshin in Japanese, is a Zen Buddhist term that was introduced to the West by Shenryu Suzuki. He's a Zen teacher who introduced the idea of beginner's mind to the West in his book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And beginner's mind can be an outlook, it can be a mindset, but it can also be a way of life. As Suzuki says, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. Can't you hear Yoda saying that in a Star Wars movie? In the beginner's mind, many possibilities. In the expert mind, there are few. Yoda was a Zen master. I'm not very good at voices. Zen Buddhism is one of many schools of Buddhism. Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana. Just like there are many arms of Christianity, Catholicism, Protestants, Eastern Orthodox. Buddhism's been around for about 2,600 years. Started in India and spread across Asia. And Zen Buddhism, which developed off of the Mahayana tradition, has become very popular in the West. The term Mahayana means great vehicle. And in general, Mahayana Buddhism is the path of striving to become fully awakened, to become a Buddha yourself. That we all have the possibility of enlightenment within us. In general, Mahayana Buddhism is focused on being, particularly on loving kindness and even acting like a bodhisattva, which is one who is dedicated to the enlightenment of all. So even if you achieve enlightenment in Mahayana Buddhism, you may decide, like a bodhisattva, to continue to incarnate in this realm for the benefit of all beings. The Mahayana Buddhist tradition, and consequently Zen Buddhism, is more focused on living the teachings rather than learning the teachings. It's more focused on the being and experience of life rather than the teachings and the sutras and the information. And I think the reason that religions and spiritual practices break up into lots of different ways of doing it is because people have different ways of approaching and experiencing life. I did a podcast on multiple intelligences, which is the brilliant work of Dr. Howard Gardner, who's a Harvard professor. It's like some people are auditory, some people are more visual, some people are kinesthetic or body-centered, and that's just unique to each person. Zen is very focused on present-centered awareness. The teachings of Eckhart Tolle and the power of now, although he doesn't orient it to Buddhism at all, are very Zen. That when we bring our awareness and our attention deeply into the now and come out of what the Buddhists call our monkey mind and come into our body, our being, our awareness, what I like to call our authentic self, it can bring us an experience of peace, groundedness, possibility that is the essence of beginner's mind. In the New Testament, in Matthew 18, Jesus says, "Unless you change and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." And becoming as a little child is beginner's mind from a Christian perspective. And beginner's mind is an attitude of openness, curiosity, that's interested in the world and sees everything from a fresh perspective. Beginner's mind has no expectations. It views risks as an adventure or an experiment and has no attachment to outcome. You know, I almost didn't have children. It wasn't something I ever wanted to do. I used to think I hated being a child, so I thought I would never want to subject anyone to being a child. But I had this optimal opportunity to create a family, so I did. And I'm so glad, because having children really deepened and changed my life in ways I could not have imagined. And when you spend time with little children, everything is new. They're fascinated by a flower, the wind. We had this adorable little boy in this mommy's group I was in who was fascinated with women's shoes. And he would make everyone take their shoes off so he could wear them. He was 2. I know his mother very well, and actually that practice continued, and he continues. to experiment with cross-dressing well into his teens. Oh, but he was fascinated with shoes. He was kind of into purses too. So around that time, I had my kids in a cooperative preschool. And the idea of a co-op is that you all work together and cooperate, and all of the parents are teachers different days of the week. There were trained teachers there as well, and they always put me on the art table. And I really hadn't done art for years. In fact, at that point, I would not have even called myself an artist. But it was this fabulous experiential environment where they would just lay different materials out on the table and let them do whatever they wanted. There was no projects. It was completely self-directed by children from 1 to 4 years old expressing their own creativity. And as long as it was safe, they could do whatever they wanted. One day we dipped tennis balls in paint and threw them at the side of the building and then washed it off. Little Andrew one afternoon said, "I want to paint with my hair." And I made a big plate of green paint and he dunked his head in it and he smeared it on a big piece of paper. And then we washed it out. So fun. I learned so much from those children. And they would twist and glue and staple and paint. And they would make elaborate stories about these creations. I was an art teacher for 13 years as my children got older in a kind of uptight Catholic school environment. And once they got into those uniforms and into kindergarten, they were taught there was a right way to do things. I used to fight with those teachers all the time. Step away from the children. Trees can be any color or shape they want. In fact, I taught art at that school because I wanted to maintain that beginner's mind in these children's creativity. But once they get into kindergarten, half of them would start asking me, "Ms. McKenna, is this good?" Ugh, I tried to beat that out of them. As I have tried to remove that concept from my own life, is this good or bad? That judgment is a problem. But when they were in preschool, the little children wouldn't ask, "Is this good?" They just wanted to tell me the story. And I learned to ask questions like, "Tell me about this," when I would look at a huge scribble with a blob of black paint, green streamers, and tinfoil stapled into it. I learned not to ask, "What is it?" which is kind of a closed question, but "Tell me about this." Oh, and they'd go off. The dinosaur ate the dog, and then they flew to the other planet, and it rained, and the rainbow shined back on the dinosaur, and then his mommy came, and everyone was happy. Whoa. Now that is creativity and beginner's mind. And those children and their infinite creativity taught me about beginner's mind. Ultimately, it completely changed the way that I do my own art. I threw away my brushes and bought a bunch of ketchup containers and started squirting and pouring paint like the children did, because my own perfectionism, my own need for things to be good, stopped me from actually being creative. The good is often the enemy of the best. When I was in college, I took an art class and we did a technical drawing of a machine. I don't even remember what the machine was. I think we went down into the boiler room and it was like the furnace or something. And we all sat in different perspectives around it and did a really detailed technical drawing on big paper. It was a pinnacle moment for me. I tell this story frequently. And the art teacher came over to me and he looked at my paper. And of course, just like those kindergarten children, I looked at him like, "Is it good?" And in fact, he said, "Technically, it's a good drawing, but it's not art." I was devastated for a moment, but I knew he was telling me the truth. It was such a teaching moment. And not just for art, but for life in general. Am I trying to be good to please other people so that they'll approve of me? Or am I living authentically, creatively, letting my own unique interpretation and interaction with the world come joyfully through like those little children with their streamers, tinfoil, and messy paint? We have that choice. And I think the reason that Zen Buddhism has taken such a hold in the West is because it is about coming out of our mind and being in the pure, pristine presence of the present moment. I love alliteration, all those P's. And most of us in the West are victimized by the information age, by the overwhelm of technology, news, media, and our own incredibly busy mind that's usually rooted in fear of the future. And when we're really deeply in the present moment, As the Zen monk Thich Nhat Hanh says, the present moment is a wonderful moment. And beginner's mind and the little children, they live in the now. Our brain is an organ, like our liver, our heart, our large intestine. And my heart's beating right now. My liver is metabolizing. My large intestine is digesting. And I don't have to think about it. They just do what they do. And my brain is the same way. It is a thought-generating machine. That's just what it does. And it has its place, but I question whether my brain should run my life any more than I let my liver run my life. As amazing and complex as the human brain is, it is kind of like a computer in that it can only output what has been put into it. And calculating though it may be, it is using past information to try to determine the future. Certainly that has function and form in many areas of life, but it also stops openness to new possibility and seeing things in different ways. Steve Jobs was a Zen practitioner, and there's some lore that in think tank culture in Apple, it was suggested to keep the experts out of the brainstorming sessions. Because when we bring our expertise to something, we're often closed-minded. We think we already know. There's nothing else to learn. We become more interested in letting people know how good we are and fluffing our own ego than seeing things with fresh eyes and new perspectives. You don't need any preparation to have beginner's mind. It's incredibly powerful, really, in any area of our life. It can be profound in relationship to approach our partner as if we are seeing and meeting them for the first time, to let go of preconceptions, expectations, and to see all things anew, awash with possibility. We live in an infinitely creative sea of consciousness, filled with new possibilities all the time. The principle and the force of evolution is constantly creating new forms, new solutions, new variations, infinite creativity. And true creativity is that which has not happened before. That which we cannot imagine at this moment is where the possibility of the emergence of something new is possible. Beginner's mind is free of expectations, lives fully in the present, and like a little child learning to walk, falls down, gets back up again, falls down, gets back up again. That's how the child learns, grows, develops their muscles. There is no failure, only a continuing stream of experience. Some may be pleasant, some may be unpleasant. There is no good or bad. I may have told this story before, but it's worth repeating. So there's a farmer, lives just outside the village, and he has a son who's a young adult, and he has an old horse. And every day he brings the horse out to the field, and each day the horse gets a little slower, and his neighbor comes over and says, "Oh, that horse. I don't know what's going to happen when your horse dies. It's going to be bad." And the old man continues to drive his horse gently and says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see." And a few weeks later, the horse drops dead. And the neighbor comes over, "Oh, I told you it would be bad. What are you going to do now without a horse?" And the old man says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see." And his son goes out and says, "Father, there's wild horses further down the valley. I'm going to go see if I can get us a new horse." And he's able to get 3 horses back in their fenced-in corral. And the neighbor comes over and says, "Oh, very good. So many horses now." The old man says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see." But the horses are wild and they need to be trained. And so the son is saddling up one of the horses and it kicks him in the leg, breaks his leg. And the other horses are so spooked by his painful yells, they kick the fence down and all the horses run away. Oh, the neighbor comes over. "This is terrible. Now you have no horses and your son is lame." The old man says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see." And a war breaks out. And all the young men in the village are required to join in the army. And they're gathered and taken away to fight this big battle. And because the son's leg is broken, he can't fight. And the battle is a terrible battle, and many of the young men are killed. And because of this series of events, the farmer's son survived, and his leg healed. And maybe it's good, and maybe it's bad. We'll see. And that's beginner's mind. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, consider subscribing or leaving a good review. And if you want to find out how spiritual psychology might benefit you in your life, or learn more about my 3-month mentorship program, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com, and check us out on Instagram @OpenDoorGrowth. Deep gratitude to my supporters on Patreon. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.